effective adaptation option, we are looking at the fact that within food systems or within water sector or even within livelihoods, we see it as very effective because at the end of the day, the migrants are able to get in something to improve on their living conditions. But then looking at it from the health perspective or from settlements or from cities, then it becomes an issue because of the burden it brings to these areas, and so then it makes adaptation quite difficult. So briefly to say that why is this, why does it matter? It matters because when we have maladaptation, we are reducing the ecosystem services we are having. When we have maladaptation, we are also increasing greenhouse gas emissions. When we have maladaptation, it's kind of shifting vulnerabilities where it puts people more, it's kind of disadvantages people more, especially the vulnerable, those who have limited incomes and all that. And then lastly, it also leads to inequity. And it is important here to state that it matters because we know that sectors, we know that people, we know that economies and regions are kind of interconnected. And so when we have maladaptation happening, and it has that kind of ripple effect, at one stage it's happening and then it's having its effect on other levels. Also to say that it's dynamic, adaptation is dynamic, and so what we see feasible now over time might not be feasible, and so it is very, very important that maladaptation is really considered in our context. Lastly, to say, how does it really impact people? It impacts people because if it's not handled well, it leads to conflicts. We have conflicts happening, injustice. We don't have people having equitable access to resources, which actually leads to conflicts. We also know that it leads to environmental degradation, like I've talked about, which the role play we are going to see today is going to kind of unpack it very well. And then also, as I talked about, it increases vulnerability. And so before I come in again, I would like us to relax and see how the role play unfolds. And then I would come in again with looking at the negative outcomes vis-a-vis the positive outcomes and how we can kind of avoid maladaptation in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Portia. I want you to join me on a journey to the year 2019, where a donor government has set aside a fund, 8 million, to implement a climate change project in a given country. This donor government has approached the Ministry of Environment to come up with an idea. The director of the ministry has approached a research partner organization to help with the identification of the relevant climate intervention. According to this research agency, the best option would be to implement an afforestation project in the northern part of this country. Why? Because this region of the country is experiencing a rapid desertification, and also according to them, the area is sparsely populated and the land is underutilized. The director of the Ministry of Environment agreed, and as you can see here, we have group of stakeholders who have been called 2 days ago to a meeting in a boardroom. They are here having a discussion in terms of whether to proceed with the maladaptation intervention or not. So now I hand over to our talented actors and actresses, and then over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's not working. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for honoring our invitation. As I stated earlier in the briefing notes, which you received 2 days ago, we are here to discuss the project to be implemented under the funding support of the donor. We appreciate your presence. Thank you also, donor, for giving us this funding.
Thank you very much, Director, for extending the invitation. As the community leader of the Thank you very much, Director, for extending the invitation. As the representative of the community, I'm the community leader. I'm aware of the view that the best project for us is regenerated, degraded grasslands, and smart water harvesting technologies?
In my opinion, as the director of research, we have done extensive research in your community, and I think we know exactly what you guys need, and a forestation project would be the best because we have mapped out everything, we have done robust research, and we think an afforestation project will be best. We can take 3 million hectares of land, as you have over 10 million hectares of land that is underutilized in the region.
Okay, thank you very much, Director of Science. I think I'm in agreement. I mean, all of us have to agree to this. Afforestation is the way to go. So let's go for it because we have the funding.
As a representative of the community, I think that any climate change project should help our people address vulnerabilities to our livelihoods. You know, we are primarily nomadic people.
Yes, yes, we are aware of your livelihoods, but based on our research, we have seen that nomadic livelihoods will become unsustainable in the next 2 decades. There is therefore a need to transform your livelihoods into a new futuristic way, and afforestation offers that pathway.
Thank you, Director of Climate Services, for hosting this inclusive and participatory session to identify the most suitable climate intervention for the fund. The agreed afforestation projects aligns with our agenda to encourage local communities to implement alternative ways to sustainably manage forest to drive economic and social benefits instead of the negative impact from deforestation.
Okay, this is great news, Donna. It aligns with our national priorities to have a 20% increase in forest coverage by 2030. We see that the benefits of afforestation can help protect bare ground from all soil erosion, flooding, sequester carbon, and a number of other social benefits. I am so excited about this project. Thank you all for this deliberation.
All right, thank you very much to our talented actors and actresses. As we said, we have a very few people who were invited 2 days before this meeting to come and have a consultation. I want you to time travel with me to the year 2030, where a local community organization has commissioned an impact assessment to understand how this project is playing out. And the findings of the assessment found that about 1.4 million hectares of land is now under afforestation, but less than 50% of the trees planted have survived because the species selected are not suitable for the harsh climatic condition. Livelihoods of the communities have been affected. The nomadic people are not able to migrate normally as they do because the area has been fenced off through this deforestation. Although 5,000 employment was promised, only 50 permanent jobs have been created, and we see that poverty has increased by about 25%. Women now have to travel longer distances to get firewood to meet their energy needs because they are not allowed access to the afforestation site. So we see all these, and in addition to that, there is a divide in the community between those who are for and against the project. So now let's take our minds back to 2019 again. We see here in a town hall a group of people who have been invited in the last phase of an extensive consultation which has been implemented by a research agency commissioned by the Ministry of Environment to determine how a donor fund will be used. Those who are here have been invited and have been given the briefing note in terms of the findings of the consultations about 6 weeks before, and we see representatives of civil society organizations, indigenous communities, youth, Christian communities, and everybody that is affected by this new intervention. So let's listen to them.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am your Director for Climate Services. Thank you for honoring our invitation for this deliberation. Over the past 6 months, we have engaged you to identify the pressing climate needs and how best to use the funds received from the donor. We appreciate your presence and kind support also of the donor in response to our need. Today we are here to deliberate on the outcome of the engagement and map out the way forward. I thereby hand you over to the Director of Research.
Thank you. A summary of our engagements is displayed on the board, and detailed information is contained in the briefing note that we sent 2 weeks ago, and we are happy to now discuss with you the outcomes of our engagements.
As the leader of the indigenous community, we are happy that our needs have been incorporated in the project. I should point out that we did not object to the proposal to plant trees in our area. Our concern was that some of these sites identified for the project are areas proposed for forest regeneration and burial places for our ancestors. We need a guarantee that these areas will be respected and protected.
Thank you very much for pointing that out, and it has been noted.
Our region has a very harsh climate. We know the kinds of indigenous tree, species that are most suitable for, to survive the harsh conditions. We need to support this project by helping to identify such trees with the most survival potentials.
As the head of the new initiatives, I see from the presentation that forestation has the most ranking among all the proposed interventions. We support that, and the funds will be used for afforestation. My department will be happy to provide support to this initiative and also in the implementation phase.
As the civil society organization representative, it is true that our afforestation is the #1 ranked option. But I think we should consider a suite of multi-connected interventions rather than only afforestation. For instance, we know that about 1.2 million hectares in local governments were forested areas that were deforested in the last 30 years. Why don't we focus on reforesting those areas? Since most of the communities engage in livestock production, we could also consider installing solar pumps that provide water for their livestock. Thank you.
Okay. This has been a very fruitful discussion. It is quite clear that we should not only consider one intervention in this location, but a suite of interventions that will address various diverse vulnerabilities in the communities. We should consider the links between these different pieces of interventions so that the most overarching beneficial outcomes are achieved. How about creating a representative group from amongst us to help in guiding the project implementation?
And then just the challenges around that. You know, why do people talk or why don't they talk in participatory meetings? Yeah, and just that in order to do locally led adaptation right, it really takes a radical mind shift for all of us, especially those in the development area. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Any last contribution? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So thanks so much for the role play. I think it's much more accessible than reading about maladaptation in 2,000 pages of an IPCC report. I had a question, and that's in the context of certain parties under UNFCCC, but also you'll see it in the IPCC sort of pushes towards transformational action and transforming systems transitions and transformational adaptation or transformative adaptation, where you see in an African context, like with a push for transformative adaptation, does that increase risks of maladaptation as opposed to more incremental approaches, or is it something that's really good to have that transformative adaptation push because it means there's more consultative processes? I'm just curious what you think about that framing, and how that relates to the risk or not of maladaptation.
All right, thanks so much, Chris, for that question. I think that question will require some time to respond to, because we have another event that we need to finish just now, I'll ask that maybe we can have that discussion at the coffee session after this. So please indulge me to do that. Portia, during her comment, mentioned the value of evidence when it comes to avoiding maladaptation. So now I will want to invite Chris to lead the discussion about the launch of the Africa Synthesis Center. So over to you, Chris. But while you're coming up, this is a QR code which has just disappeared for the policy brief on maladaptation. So please feel free to scan it so that you can access that policy brief. Thank you very much. Very good.
Surprise, I'm not Chris. And we were sort of taken aback that we're actually running ahead of schedule, which after yesterday is quite remarkable. I'm Bruce Curry-Alder. I get the opportunity of co-leading the CLARE, Climate Adaptation and Resilience Initiative. And really, I just want to make a quick segue, which I think was already well established, but the danger of the single recommendation and the importance of drawing on diverse sources of evidence and research, making sure that we have diverse forms of dialogue feeding into how are we investing into the future. Without further ado, I'd like to invite to the stage Peter from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from the Netherlands, who will start us off. Anne from the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, are you in the room? Please, Anne. Welcome to the stage. And my colleague Annette from Canada's International Development Research Centre. So each of them will speak very briefly, and then we'll turn the floor over to Chris to say something about where we're going next. Peter?
Thank you, Bruce. It's Peter. The Dutch always have funny spellings, so everyone gets confused, but it's Peter, just to make things easy. Good morning to you all. I hope you've had breakfast. I haven't really, but we'll probably, as you've kicked off, we're all energetic, so probably get going very well. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Peter Kopper. I work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Netherlands in the climate team. I take care of climate adaptation, and I'm also our focal point for the Step Change program, which was introduced just at the beginning of this session. And yeah, we find it a really exciting project. It's about obviously building the capacities of local actors to do knowledge brokering through equitable and locally led adaptation. And it's super important, I think the session highlights. And it's really exciting to be part of this because as part of Step Change, which is, I should say, is also in partnership with Canada's IDRC, International Research Development Centre, that we're doing this, and we'll talk a bit about the UK's involvement on that. But it's really about the knowledge part, but transferring knowledge into action. And we're really excited about that. There's knowledge gaps we need to fill, but for us, we sit in so many of these sessions and we talk, and talking is great, but we want to get into action, right? So that bridging the gap from knowledge, where we're building the capacities to get more knowledge, and then transferring that into action. That's what we're really excited about, and we're proud to contribute to. And I'm very happy to help support or help launch the great initiative that Chris will discuss and elaborate on further. So I will pass on to Anne.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning, everybody. Morning, everybody. I'm sure we have not all had our breakfast. Some of us were sipping coffee and water, but I'm sure we'll be able to get something around the corner. The good thing of coming early is that, one, you get in. I hear the president is here now and everything's been locked down. And two, you'll be able to get your breakfast very soon. So my name is Anne Angwenyi. I'm the Climate and Environment Advisor at the British High Commission in Kenya. So under our ministry, FCDO, Foreign Commonwealth Development. So in terms of what we heard today, I mean, that was really an interesting way of presenting maladaptation through the role play. As someone said, it's better than reading 2,000 pages and just getting lost in all that information. This really came out very well. And what this session did is that it really drove home the aspect of how maladaptation might arise when we have short-term thinking, or the idea that, you know, we know best because we've been to school, we're more educated, so we know better than what the people, the local people know. So really what this did is to tell us, when you have short-term thinking, you will complicate matters on the ground, and there are dire consequences to that. So we heard about the fact that, you know, it's important that information should be evidence-based. George, in his intro remarks, just talked about, and shout out to George, he's a long-term colleague. I'm happy to see him here. We bump into each other in the most interesting of places. But back to what I was saying, in terms of informing our action, we need it to be evidence-based. We also need it to be responsive to the context in which we are working in, and it also requires to be as participatory as possible. It was mentioned in the audience that if we don't get participatory processes right, if we have these so-called, you know, one stakeholder session, tick box, we got the stakeholders, they said yes, we're really not going to answer a lot of these issues right. So our flagship program, this CLARE, the Climate Adaptation Resilience Program, that is funded by both the UK government and also with IDRC. The aim is basically to try and tackle this challenge of maladaptation. So through needs-driven, focused research, CLARE tries to link up short and long-term issues, and yeah, I think we have presidents coming in for a climate conference that has helicopters flying all over the place. Yeah, I think one of those, no, this is not right. So let me just give the sirens an opportunity to come through. Yes, all the SUVs, I can see them coming through. I think that's number 10 coming right through. Gas Gazlas, those of you who have the ear of the president, I think these are the things we really need to change. The concept of having VIPs traveling in 10-car convoys, SUVs, is just not right. I appreciate, in the Netherlands, I've seen the Prime Minister on a bicycle. It's the most amazing thing. So anyway, so back to what I was saying. So CLARE tries to link up the short and long-term issues to enable long-term sustainable and just economic and social development to take place. So research that is supported by CLARE is also trying to bridge these critical gaps between science and action. Developing new tools that will support not just partner governments, but also communities in the private sector to make decisions that are evidence-based, that are innovative, and that can drive effective solutions. Lastly, CLARE provides an opportunity to strengthen the capacity of both those who are carrying out research, especially in our local institutions, and those who will be using the resulting evidence to inform responsive adaptation practices, which is core to why we're also co-investing alongside Step Change, as you mentioned, and that is why we are supporting, and it's really exciting, this new Baobab project. And just lastly to say, I really, really hope that this is something that will be beneficial to all the stakeholders who are engaged in this project. Thank you very much.
Hello, you can hear me, yeah. Thank you very much. And, I'm Annette Lema, and I'm a Senior Program Officer at the International Development Research Center, based here in Nairobi. And I would also like to join my colleagues to commend the team that communicated the concept of maladaptation, meaning that we can not only be researchers actually, but we build talent to be actors and actresses and communicate information in diverse modes. That was very good. Thank you very much. So indeed, as a partner and co-founder of both Clear and Step Change, IDRC is also pleased to announce this project called Baobao that builds on collaboration between leaders from climate adaptation research and policy to advance the evidence base, mobilize and expand strong capacities. IDRC, along with our donor partners from the Netherlands and UK, are pleased to be supporting climate action in Africa, through both the Step Change and Clear programs. Yesterday, I think I attended quite a number of sessions, and many of the participants or panelists were arguing that the pledges made by all these other countries haven't come through. And when I see all this money coming through from these donor countries, I'm like, well, isn't this the contribution that these countries allude to? Or isn't it part of that contribution? So I am pleased to join our partners to launch this new Baobab project, which will support Africa-led transdisciplinary teams to conduct rigorous synthesis research on climate adaptation priorities for the continent. And I think I'll leave it at that note and invite Christopher, who is the lead of this initiative, to give us more details about the project or initiative. Christopher, over to you.
Can you hear me? No. Yeah, great. So first, thank you so much to CDK and Agnes and others for letting us borrow the last 15 minutes of the session. And thank you very much to the governments of the UK, Canada, and the Netherlands for supporting this project. Just a quick history of the genesis of this project and then what I think it can do and why we would love for all of you to be involved. So I was a coordinating lead author of the Africa chapter of IPCC, and we often think of Africa as data scarce in a climate context, but actually in many sectors we're surprisingly data rich. And the thing that we're often lacking is support to integrate data and knowledge on climate risks and solutions. And when we do that, I think there are many research projects that have shown how Africa can actually be a thought leader in the global climate solutions and climate negotiation space, both at a multilateral level but also at a local level. We have lots of innovation, we have lots of amazing ideas on how to solve the problem. We have lots of really rich and diverse research traditions across the continent. And so what this project really about is the opportunity as a platform for synthesis, for integration, because that's one of the things so far that we've lacked in a lot of the climate conversation on the continent. There's support for kind of knowledge translation, policy briefs, important work like what CDKN is doing, but on the research side we haven't had as much opportunity to bring the researchers and the decision makers and the knowledge translators together to make statements and research findings that are more than the sum of their parts. And so a particular focus for these projects, supported by the UK, Canada, and the Netherlands, will be around climate adaptation and climate resilient development in line with themes of CDKN and Claire. We're very grateful that we're partnered with Agnes, with CDKN, and with the Africa Adaptation Initiative. And these teams, the mode of work of this will be at the University of Cape Town is where we are based, but the research teams will be African-led, and they can be led by a researcher and decision maker from anywhere on the continent. You do not have to be at the University of Cape Town. And if you apply for a team and you're successful in having a team awarded, we will fund you to come to the Africa Climate Development Initiative for up to 4 weeks over a 2-year period. There will also be funding for a postdoctoral researcher for the data synthesis of your team for up to 3 years, and partnering with groups like Agnes and CDKN, there will be a lot of co-creation of the research question with policymakers, as well as capacity building and strategic communications in knowledge translation. So it really is a fantastic opportunity, and I think in many ways, in a research context, will elevate the important role synthesis can play for the future of climate solutions on the continent and globally. And so I'd end by saying, please keep an eye out for, if you're interested right now, please come and speak to any of us. But otherwise, keep an eye out towards the end of October or early November for the first open calls for research synthesis teams under this program, and we'd be very excited to see applications from African-led teams who would like to do data and knowledge integration on climate adaptation and resilience. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if we have time for questions. Someone was flashing an end sign, but we're also 10 minutes early, so I'm not sure. Or is this the actual end? It is. Okay. Thank you.
But I think you need the photograph of this group. So please.
Can you join us, George?
I can enjoy the photograph.
One with you, and then we get the actors on stage too, right?
Okay. Okay. Bruce, who did you want to come? The actors, those actors, please. Those who played a role. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much.
I didn't act, so. Okay, I can behave like one. Oh, yeah, the big one. Okay, thanks. Thanks for all of you for coming early. But just to let you know that during 25th to 27th of September, we'll be having the SADC parliamentary session in Gaborone. And one of the things we'll be discussing is how do you use knowledge products? And how can Parliament help in that space? So please talk to my colleagues. Madaka is here, who happens to be a fellow from IDRC. And of course, we have our usual partner called Laura here. Thanks.
For all the people who been downgrade, nah, I became that nigga. Bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, gudu bang, gudu bang, hey bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, gudu bang, gudu bang.
Money la dojo to beg out, they put a metal. I want in me kulu temper, kulu temper. Money la dojo to beg out, they put a metal. As you enter, road remember. Kulu temper, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, gudu bang, gudu bang, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, gudu bang, gudu bang.
Everybody run, everybody scatter. The skills are Mr. Dong. The girls them look Maya. Them they call me Obio, like my name na Davido. Cause they see me for TV and I they for radio. I don't pay my dues, yo. You can't keep the change, yo. Let the people where they owe me make them pay my money, yo. Bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, gudu bang, gudu bang, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang, bang gudu bang.